Hi, this is Lisa Rangel with Chameleon Resumes, the premier executive resume writing company, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about how your executive resume and your LinkedIn profile need to complement each other. I often get a question, how resume edits affect a LinkedIn profile. If I'm customizing my resume, how do I can't customize my LinkedIn profile. How do I make that work? So it comes back to, how your executive resume and LinkedIn profile is supposed to work together. And so I want to address 3 points that are going to help you make the relationship between those two documents be more effective. So the first, observation point to make, I'm not even sure what to call it, but the first thing I want to share with you is, any customizations that you make to your resume, you need to make sure you then look at that new variation of your resume, look at it alongside of your LinkedIn profile, and make sure they still complement each other. All right. You never want your resume and profile to convey two different, versions of you. You want them to be complementary. They should always be complementary. What you don't want to happen, you make a customization to your resume and then that hiring manager looks at your LinkedIn profile and goes, that's not what they said on the resume. You don't want that to happen. So, while you can't customize your profile every time you submit to a job, you need to make sure that every customization you make to your resume still is in sync with your profile. So that's something you always want to make sure you do. The second point that I want to make is, I often get the question like, how are resumes and profiles different? How are they the same? They're clearly similar, right? But there's parts of a profile that don't exist on a resume, like such as the recommendations and the project section and the skills section. And, there's parts of a resume that don't exist on a profile. And like the contact information part up top on a resume isn't really up top for the profile, right? So, there's parts that are, and then there's parts that they're the same, right? They both have a summary, but the purpose of the summary for the resume is different than the, and abilities of the summary for the profile are different. So the purpose of each function that is similarly titled can have different purposes. So, the key is to, the basis of the information isn't necessarily going to be that different, the basis of the information for both of them. But, you want to make sure your headline for the LinkedIn profile is much more keyword rich and sends a powerful punch, because that's often what people are seeing before they click to read more. Then, with the resume, you have the ability of the title, the subtitle, and the rest of the summary section in that top third of the resume to have a visual impression. So, there's some differences, right? And you just need to make sure those differences are nuanced, that when you look at so any customization you make to your resume, you need to then look at the first impression for each and make sure those two impressions are complementary and they're supporting each other. So that's just something to be aware of also. And the third part is, while we've been talking about how these documents should be in sync and complement each other, you also want to look at them independently as the first impression. If a recruiter is doing a search on LinkedIn and stumbles across your profile as part of their search results, that profile is the first impression, right? So what is the first impression you're giving about yourself in that profile? And then when they reach out to you and then ask for your resume, is your resume going to support the profile? Well, you also want to do that in reverse. Say you're networking, you're reaching out to people, and you're attached, they say, oh great, send me your resume, and you send the resume, or you've submitted a resume through a job board posting, and they look at your resume, and then they go onto LinkedIn to type you in and look you up, and they see your profile. That resume is the first impression, and the profile is supporting your resume. So you want to make sure you do that process to make sure that your resume gives off a good first impression and then is supported by your profile being viewed second. And you want to do that the other way. Make sure your profile has a good first impression, and make sure that upon receiving your resume as a follow-up, it's going to be reinforced. Your profile content is going to be reinforced by your resume. So, so basically these 3 points are, you want to look at them separately, you want to look at them together, you want to always just make sure that they're in sync. And then, if any edits you do make to your resume to customize it for a particular job, you just always need to circle back to your profile and make sure your profile is always supporting your resume. So we kind of went in a few different directions here, despite having a 1, 2, and 3. I know we overlapped a little bit, but it's important that you make sure that these marketing collateral documents do complement each other and continue to support your candidacy to get you to that interview. So with that said, if you would like to learn how to write your profile, we're going to be having a session that you can participate in. It's free. If you go to the registration below, you will be able to register for our LinkedIn training, how to write your LinkedIn profile to land a 6-figure job. And like I said, it's free. And then because you'll be on our mailing list, you'll get our subsequent how to write your resume training, which we do 2 weeks later. So make sure that you register using the link in the description to get to the LinkedIn training. And then shortly after that, you'll be getting the resume training to follow. So I look forward to seeing you on the training. If you like this video, I'm going to ask you to like it. If you feel like it will help someone, I'm going to ask you to share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so this way you don't miss next week's session. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to post a comment or email me your question at lr@chameleonresumes.com. I read and reply to every email and every comment. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on the session. Take care.